The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
But also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect.
Yes. This is a choice between a Conservative Party that stood up for common sense and a Labour Party that bent the knee to every passing fad.
Did you see the moment Keir Starmer's carefully constructed facade crumbled before our very eyes? The Prime Minister, who promised a new era of politics, was left stammering when confronted with his own contradictions on the definition of a woman. In a stunning display of political cowardice, Starmer refused to face Rosie Duffield, a former Labour MP who stood her ground on women's rights issues. The Supreme Court has spoken, biological sex matters, and now Starmer's desperate backpedalling reveals what many have suspected all along. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. When the Supreme Court delivered its landmark ruling on the 2010 Equality Act, the carefully constructed house of cards that was Keir Starmer's gender identity policy came crashing down. For years, Starmer had emphatically declared that trans women are women, positioning himself as a champion of progressive values.
Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers.
This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will; to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will.
This wasn't just a casual remark. It was a cornerstone of Labour's approach to gender identity issues, a line repeated with conviction whenever the question arose. Then came the legal sledgehammer. The Supreme Court ruled definitively that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act refer specifically to biological women and biological sex, not gender identity. Suddenly, Starmer found himself cornered by the very legal system he once represented as Director of Public Prosecutions. The court's judgment, celebrated by many as a victory for common sense, created an impossible political situation for the Prime Minister. What followed was one of the most dramatic policy U-turns in recent British politics. After years of silence while women's rights campaigners faced vicious backlash, Starmer suddenly admitted that their treatment had been clearly wrong. This startling reversal came with a Downing Street spokesman acknowledging that figures like J.K. Rowling had not been treated appropriately, an extraordinary admission from a man who had stood by while they were vilified. The internal fractures within Labour became immediately apparent. Health Secretary Wes Streeting pointedly declared that, by definition, trans women are trans women, adding that while he would respect identities and use preferred pronouns, trans women are not the same as biological women. This statement represented a seismic shift away from Labour's previous messaging and exposed deep divisions within the party's ranks. Meanwhile, the real-world consequences of this political vacillation played out on the streets. Protests and counter-protests erupted, some featuring inflammatory rhetoric and imagery that revealed the dangerous polarisation that had taken root. As demonstrators clashed over women's rights and trans inclusion, the vacuum of leadership from Downing Street became increasingly apparent. Julie Bindel, a prominent voice on gender issues, didn't mince words, accusing Starmer of fueling trans activist bullies. Her criticism suggested that the Prime Minister's leadership had created a climate where intimidation of women's rights advocates was not just tolerated, but enabled. The accusation struck at the heart of Starmer's self-image as a defender of justice and equality. While Bindel's criticism stung from the outside, Starmer's most bruising confrontation was yet to come. Inside the hallowed chamber of Parliament, Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch had been preparing a calculated political ambush that would expose the Prime Minister's vulnerability on an issue he'd hoped to leave behind. The atmosphere in the House was electric that day. MPs shuffled papers and murmured amongst themselves as Badenoch rose from her seat, her posture confident, her purpose clear. What followed wasn't merely political theatre, it was a surgical strike against Starmer's character, designed to lay bare what many now saw as his fundamental weakness. An inability to maintain principled positions when faced with pressure. Badenoch's attack was devastating in its precision. She accused the Prime Minister of lacking moral courage and bending the knee to every passing fad, rather than protecting women's spaces. Her words cut through the parliamentary noise like a knife, framing Starmer's policy shift not as thoughtful reconsideration, but as a betrayal of principle, a capitulation that exposed his leadership as hollow at its core. Even more telling was what didn't happen next. According to broadcaster Carol Malone, former Labour MP Rosie Duffield was denied the opportunity to scold Keir Starmer, even as her very presence loomed over the chamber. Speaker Lindsay Hoyle's intervention effectively silenced a woman whose gender-critical views represented the very constituency Starmer claimed to now support. Had Duffield been permitted to speak, what uncomfortable truths might she have forced the Prime Minister to confront? What pointed questions about his years of silence while women like her faced harassment would he have been compelled to answer? The parliamentary manoeuvre to shield him from this confrontation spoke volumes about the fragility of his position. When Starmer finally responded, he retreated to vague platitudes about treating everyone with dignity and respect, a stark contrast to the specific accusations levelled against him. The evasion was painfully obvious, revealing a politician unwilling to engage directly with the substance of criticism, even when it came from those who had once been allies. Throughout the exchange, Starmer's body language betrayed his discomfort, shifting in his seat, avoiding direct eye contact, adopting a defensive posture. These weren't the actions of a confident leader standing firm on principle. They were the nervous tics of someone caught in a position he couldn't defend with conviction. It's not merely the Supreme Court ruling that's significant, but J.K. Rowling's scathing assessment that truly captures Starmer's leadership crisis. She directly labelled him a coward for finally acknowledging that a woman is an adult female, but only after the court forced his hand. This delayed admission reveals a Prime Minister who waits for legal permission before speaking truth, leaving those in the crossfire of the gender debate to fight battles alone. If Starmer lacks the conviction to take a stance on defining basic terminology until legally compelled, what other crucial issues will he abdicate responsibility for? Can Britain truly weather today's storms with such hesitant leadership?